All started out when I was 6 years old, and I went with my mom and my brother to modeling open call at a Holiday Inn in Vermont, and that sort of sparked my interest. There were a lot of people there for it being an event in Vermont, and I kind of just wasn't really familiar with the modeling world or anything because I was really young, but that was probably the earliest memory that I can think of where I thought about wanting to be a model. One thing I didn't know about my mom until just last summer after I met with my grandparents. Basically, she had wanted to go down to New York City to be a designer, and she had gotten accepted into FIT, which is one of the best schools, and her mom would never let her go because she always thought that she would get raped and murdered in Central Park or something like that. She would just never, she was really controlling, and I think her mom was really controlling and her dad wasn't controlling. So, for example, her mom would always ground her and her dad would let her drink beers in the garage with him when she was 13 years old. The next time I can remember really pursuing it again was when I was 16 years old, and I met with a agency in New Hampshire, and they were really small. It was like a small town kind of thing. The woman that I talked to said that I had potential, and I went down there and signed contracts and papers that I wasn't really that familiar with. I didn't really know too much about any of it, but I went through with it because I really wanted to do it. And they made me feel really confident about my ability to do it. So I worked with them for a couple weeks. And I remember watching people look out the window while the photographer was taking pictures of me, and I just kind of felt wow, they're looking at me, they must think that I'm a model, they must think that I'm, going somewhere. It felt good to have people look at me kind of like a celebrity in a way, because that's kind of your dream in the end with any kind of modeling, acting, dancing thing. You don't really want to tell everyone that you want to be a model because they think that you think you're really good looking, or they think you're conceited or you're self-centered, but I don't feel like that's the way that I am. They always kind of ask me for money at some point, and I gave them the money both times. The one time I actually could check my email, I checked it and I found out that they had went bankrupt and all the funds and everything that they had were liquidated, so all the money that I had put into it was also gone. The whole time that I've maintained wanting to do modeling, I've never really had anyone saying, no, you shouldn't do that, no, I think that's stupid, don't spend $1,200 on a photographer. So for me, it's all been kind of my own learning process, because I never had someone like my mom had, because my mom had her mom as a buffer, but I don't have that. So all the mistakes I've made were my own, so that helps me learn a little bit more about it. And I always kind of thought that it was really random that I wanted to do modeling, and I didn't really realize why. She always wanted us to be just do what we wanted to do, and her and my dad, although they both had alcohol problems, they always loved us, and I know that they always encouraged us, but they always wanted us to do what we wanted to do. I never really felt to be honest with you, I never really felt like I had it as bad as I could have with parents with an alcohol problem, because while they did have an alcohol problem, I never got beat, I never was molested, I never had any of those kind of things happen to me. Pretty much the worst thing that happened to me was neglect, and basically that was my parents being too drunk to take care of us or fighting amongst themselves. So basically my brother and I, who's 18 months apart from me, raised each other. The reason my parents both, I think, were alcoholics, well, they both had deep-seated alcohol problems on both sides of their families. My dad was from a family of 7 different brothers and 1 sister, and of an abusive father, and his mom did everything she could kind of deal, but still it was just he was a product of the 70s, so I think that in itself explains a lot. My mom, on the other hand, she, like I said, had a strict mom and a not so strict dad, and her dad would always, he would encourage her. She was kind of like the tomboy, so she was her dad's daughter, and she would go out and drink beer with him in the garage, and I think he kind of encouraged her at an early age just to, it was alright. and she was just a wild child, another product of the 70s, I think. And my dad and my mom, they had like an abusive relationship. My dad would abuse her, like he would hit her when he got really, really drunk, and he wouldn't remember what he did, but my brother and I would remember. And there were like at least a handful of times that me and my brother had to like wake my mom up after my dad had hit her and like remind her who she was. So they just didn't operate well together. My mom was verbally abusive to him. They were just crazy together. They would still come together every once in a while and probably have sex or whatever because they both hadn't found anyone else. And so that'd be really confusing for my brother and I, because like this was like, they separated when I was like probably 12 or 13, probably 13. So really there was only about a 9-month period between when they separated and when my mom passed away. She actually passed away a week, like 6 days before I turned 14. I found her on the ground next to the couch, and she looked really out of it, but I figured it was probably the same kind of thing that had happened before. So I didn't really think much of it, which sounds kind of messed up, but we didn't have a phone at the time because at that point my dad and her had separated like 8 months ago, 8 months previous to what I'm speaking about right now. And so I ran down to my neighbor's house and grabbed the phone, called 911, and all of the EMT people came, and it was a little bit awkward because they were all people that I had known throughout the town because they're volunteers. We had to like talk in a conference room about what we were going to do, because if we didn't pull the plug, then she was going to end up getting like her arms and legs cut off and be like physically or mentally retarded. So it was pretty much got to the point where my little brother, or my big brother, I'm sorry, was just like, we need to do what we have to do. And that basically meant pull the plug. And it was kind of annoying because no one would really say it except for him, but he was only like 16 years old, whereas there was 75, 45-year-old men in the room who should have made that decision. And so in the end we decided to pull the plug. And I remember talking with her, and I remember feeling her, squeezing her hand, and I remember walking in the room and the nurse looked at me and I started crying instantly when I saw her, just because it was too much for me to even handle. And she was like, "Oh, it'll be okay, honey." And it was just kind of like, how do you know? Like, you don't even know. Like, she did know, but she probably didn't know what to say. And so I talked with my mom for a little while she was there, and at that point she was going through death. She had like blotches on her skin, red marks from blood pooling. Her body was really hard and cold because she was going through rigor mortis. And pretty much just said my goodbyes and just went back, and I went to school the next day because I just kind of wanted to keep going through with it. And then after that, the next 6 months I don't really remember much of, because I just pretty much started smoking a lot of weed and drinking and smoking cigarettes. Not like that's, but I just sort of like rebelled a little, and I didn't think about it at all that way then because I was young, and obviously I'm still young, but I was much younger. But I really think I did that just to numb it all. But after that, after those, I went through the experimental phase, and I just was in like this, like feeling like I don't know, I would always get paranoid. This is after like a year of me just like smoking weed all the time and just numbing myself. And then this China trip came up, and I was really excited to go on it. And I wanted to be able to actually remember what had happened on the trip, so I decided to stop smoking. My mom passing away was one of the most powerful, motivating things in my life, because when she passed away, I had the choice to either follow a path of drugs and just saying fuck it, or I had a choice to be motivated and use that experience. And as for my brother, he always kind of acted out, I guess, and he never really got the attention from my mom that he wanted, I don't think. And so he kind of turned into a pretty big alcoholic himself. Currently he's in Afghanistan in the army right now. It's his second tour. Right now my dad, he lives in Vermont. He ended up, there's so many things I haven't told you. He ended up being with this woman that he was with before he was with my mom for like a little while, but then he left her to be with my mom. They ended up reconnecting after like a year after my mom passed away, and they are together now and have been together for like 9 years. He actually just recently, a month and a half ago, got a DUI himself, which is like one of like the 5th ones he's ever had in his life. So he's like pretty much a mess himself. So alcohol has manifested itself in my family in so many different negative ways, and I wish I could say I choose not to drink, but I mean I still go out and party, but I don't do it the way that my family does.